All right, welcome. Thanks for having me here. I know it's a little chaotic with the agenda today, going back and forth. But yeah, I'm excited to get into this topic that you saw in the invite we sent out for this event. So this session is the first time I'm presenting it. It's all about email templates and a couple of things that I've kicked or hit my head against the wall with, and have started to think about the best way to do it moving forward. And I've applied it in one of my clients' orgs that I'm going to show you today. And I want to show you sort of how was thinking about all of this, the rabbit holes I went down, show you how I'm solving it, and then open it up for questions. I will keep the chat open, so if you have any thoughts or questions at all, feel free to either come off mute or you can type in the chat and I'll make sure we get your questions answered. Where I'd like to start is understanding in Salesforce, and we're talking about email templates here, and even more specifically, if you're trying to send automated emails. So it's nothing that anybody needs to edit the copy before it goes out. Nobody's handwriting a message. These are situations where something happens in the system and you want an automated email to go out that sort of follows a template, it has merge fields, et cetera, et cetera. I've looked across all the different ways you can set up an email template in Salesforce, and there's about 7 different options that you have, or 8 that I have listed here. And I just want to list some of the major features that you might want in your email templates and understand where that's possible. So the first one is conditional visibility. That's things where I want this part of the message to show up under these conditions. An if statement will work in like a classic text email. You could put something inside of curly braces and say, if the status is open, then put this message, otherwise put some other message. That same concept you can do in any kind of email template you might set up. There's 4 in classic where you have to go to the setup menu to set up that email template. There's text only. You can do this classic HTML, which lets you do a letterhead along with that. Classic custom is the same idea as HTML, but there is no letterhead. Both of these accept HTML markup. There's this classic visual force option that also accepts HTML markup, but has a couple other bells and whistles for visual force. The right side here, the first 3 are set up in the Lightning email template area, which has its own tab in the navigation menu. So that's not in setup, but you can get to that through that dedicated tab. Same idea there. It kind of mimics the HTML with letterhead, and then you can do the custom Lightning template builder, which I can show you if you haven't seen that yet. And the very last option over here on the right is just configuring your email template solely within Flow. So I wanted to include all 8 flavors of ways you can set up email and then walk through a couple key features here. So conditional visibility, that's available across the board. Merging information from one object. So every kind of template that you set up, you have to specify what object do you want to reference for merge fields. And if you have a field on that object, you can bring it in as a merge field across every kind of template. So far, the score is even. You could use anything you want to accomplish both of these things. As you get more complex in the features that you want to incorporate into your email templates, they start to not be available across every kind of template. First thing is if you want to merge information from a parent object. So if you set up an email template based on opportunity and you want to bring in some account information, how would you do that? I have this gear icon for like, it's possible, but it requires a bit of a workaround. So typically what you do is you go set up a formula field on that object, in that example, on the opportunity object, that simply traverses that account relationship and references that account value. And if you do that, you could bring in that information from a parent object going up to 5 levels and pull that into your email template across the board. But it does require that little bit of workaround. And if you do this extensively, you'll find that you are creating tons and tons and tons of reference fields on whatever object just to send an email template. I wanted to highlight that in Visual Force, there is some boilerplate functionality around traversing relationships that does not require this workaround. So you can directly in Visual Force go through that account relationship, pull in that account value without creating a custom field on the opportunity object. The same is true in Flow. So if you have a record variable, you can traverse that relationship field and do the exact same thing. So in those two instances, it's sort of built in to that email template framework that you can bring in merge fields from parent objects. The flip side of that would be bringing in information from child objects. A lot of times the use case here is a receipt. So you might create an opportunity and put a bunch of products against that opportunity, and you want to send an email to the person who submitted that opportunity saying, thank you for your payment of X amount of dollars. Here are all the products that you purchased as part of your order. And you'd want to list out all the opportunity products with their amount, any notes, et cetera, et cetera. I put two gear icons here because the workaround for that would be to summarize that information using automation and put it in a custom field on whatever object where you're basing your email template. So that's a couple extra steps. You're going to have to think about markup for that. In text, yeah, you could put everything in there with line breaks. That might look okay. In HTML, you could wrap that summary information and create HTML markup for that. It's not going to be something that's super scalable across the board. So pretty difficult to do that. Let me see what this question is about. Email template object refers to one of the columns here. No, I think when I'm saying email template, it's just the concept of setting up a template in Salesforce. So these are the different types of email templates. Some of them are, like I said, classic through the setup menu. These three are available on the email templates object that comes with Lightning, and then Flow is that final concept there.
I think the question means like your second to last column, Lightning Template Builder.
Yeah,
I was interpreting that as meaning like the email template object in Lightning.
yeah, that tab called email template. Yes,
Yeah. Where
that
like you click the
applies
button,
for.
it says new email template, like that's the
Mhm.
name of the object.
Yeah, that's these three columns here for the Lightning part of it. Um, yeah, let me show you that real quick so that we're all on the same page.
Because enhanced letterhead is sort of its own separate thing because like you can look up to an enhanced letterhead from the email template.
Yes, that is true. So I wanted to sort of draw the parallel between um, you can do HTML without the letterhead specified, but in this column, if you have letterhead specified, it allows you to do things where you're keeping headers and footers consistent, which we'll get to in a second here. This second to last option here with the email template builder, it's really just a nicer like WYSIWYG for um, dragging and dropping components into a template. But let me show you that just so we can get some visuals on this. Change my password. Unbelievable. Yeah, Doty's already seeing the pattern I'm drawing here. And yeah, there's lots of things you can do, but is it always a good idea? And how scalable is it going to be? Like, those are the forever questions we're asking. All right, so in Lightning, email templates that you search for from the app launcher, it's its own separate tab, its own separate object. This is what I'm talking about when I say Lightning email templates. And you can create a new one, and it's sort of akin to an HTML email template. If you specify everything here, you have this option for enhanced letterhead that allows you to set a letterhead that sort of keeps your header and footers consistent there. In this org, I've turned on the email template builder. So the builder is what I'm talking about in this second to last column. It it looks like this. Like you essentially you create that email template, but all of the building you do in order to specify the markup, instead of doing it on a field on this object, you go into this builder view. There's a couple features you essentially have to turn on, like give people permission to do this, that I've only found out about through this effort of trying to figure out the best way to do things. You get this lovely WYSIWYG, it kind of looks like the Lightning app builder, but it's focused on building out an email template. And they do have a couple standard components here. You can do some layout stuff. There's nothing in here that sort of breaks down any barriers or accomplishes anything you couldn't already do in an email template. It's just a nicer drag and drop interface for building some of this stuff. It's really good to know about if you have somebody at an org, maybe you're a consultant, maybe you're at the admin, but you have somebody in the marketing department and they are looking for a drag and drop builder. This is included in Sales Cloud. There's no extra Marketing Cloud license you have to get to enable this. You just have to turn on the feature and then assign them the permission.
Can you
I
show
can,
again how you turn that feature on? Because yeah, I'm having an
yeah,
aha moment
yeah,
that being a thing that exists.
absolutely. All right, I think the first thing is it's an email setting somewhere. Lightning email templates. What do I have to do for the builder? I think this is the permission. So it's called drag and drop content builder is the name of the permission you have to give to people. And
Is
if
that a
you,
standard permission
yeah,
or one you made?
no, it's a standard permission. Yeah, it comes with every Salesforce org. It's just not doled out to anybody. Checked. Field. I don't have the, I think it's just system. Yeah, so under system permissions, you have this access drag and drop content builder. And once you turn that on and assign it to people, then from any template, you add this edit and builder button to the layout, they'll be able to go into the builder here. Yeah, really cool to know about. Again, it's mostly for the drag and drop capabilities, gives you some cool layout stuff. As far as features it unlocks, it's not really doing anything extra for us. It's just a nicer way to build some of these if you're doing Lightning email templates. Any other questions on that before we keep going here? Thank you for putting the article in the chat there so you can read up on that. Okay, switching back to this. Next thing I was trying to do is HTML markup. So a lot of times the email situations, they have to look good. They need to look pretty. They need to have images. They need to have buttons, et cetera, et cetera. Classic text, that's simply not available. You're going to get text only. In classic HTML, you can do some of these things. I've even gone as far as like hacking the input window. If you like inspect it with the browser, you can put in your own HTML markup and then hit the save button and it'll do it, but it's not super user friendly. The rest of these options make it pretty straightforward to put in your HTML markup so you can do all of your lovely images hosted wherever you post them. You can put buttons, you can do tables, you can do anything you can imagine. So at this point, it's kind of like classic text is kind of off the table if you're going to do anything that needs to look nice. Some of these other things are still in play if you're willing to go through the workarounds. Classic Visual Force is still supporting all these things natively without needing to do any workarounds. The last thing that I was trying to incorporate was having consistent headers and footers. A lot of times my clients will have a whole suite of automated emails that need to go out, but they want the header to be consistent across the board. They want the footer to be consistent across the board. Sometimes the information in their footer will change, and it's really annoying if all those things are configured independently. You had to go into every single email template to update the phone number in the footer. So I wanted to have a way to centrally store that header and footer information and apply it to a bunch of templates. Now, the two that really excel at this, as far as where you set up your email template, classic HTML with letterhead. That letterhead feature is there to make sure you specify whatever you want your header or footer to be, and you manage that as its own record. And if you make a change to that, it gets applied to all of the classic HTML email templates that are using that letterhead. Same is true in the Lightning world with enhanced letterhead, exact same concept. It's just the same feature for Lightning email templates. And that applies if you're using that fancy interface builder, you can still specify enhanced letterhead, and then anything you're doing in that drag and drop builder is happening in the body. In Flow, you could do something like that. I feel like it would be a hefty workaround to try to like set up a flow that is just giving you back HTML content for your header and HTML content for your footer. I have never attempted that, but I think it could be feasible. Some of these others, classic text is not going to do anything like that. If you have just custom HTML in your classic custom template, there's no way to reference anything else. There's no way to like reference a component or anything, as far as I can tell. In Visual Force, I was able, like, there's a lot of boilerplate functionality as far as referencing Visual Force components. In my first iteration of this, I just had a Visual Force component that was the header, and that way I could centrally manage that header markup and in any email templates. So through this process, it was a lot of trying to string together like what works here, what works there, how do I like bring all this together? And it kind of drove me crazy to the point where I ended up hiring a developer to help me solve for the one thing that classic Visual Force couldn't do is can I have like a systemic way to make sure headers and footers look nice? At the same time, I tasked them with what other things need to happen from a boilerplate level to make sure that these email templates render nicely across various email clients. I want to make sure it looks good in Gmail. It needs to look good on Outlook, Outlook on the desktop, Outlook on mobile, Yahoo Mail, you name it. Like there were several different email clients that we tested just to make sure the markup we is going to come across the same way that we specify it and not get all mucked around by stuff that Outlook is doing. So what we settled on was I want to use Visual Force email templates for the benefits of being able to reference parent-child information very easily, supports HTML markup. I just need to solve for consistent headers and footers and making sure they render across different email templates. So we set up a couple things. And I'm going to have all this available for you so that you could do the same thing that I'm doing as an unmanaged package that you can install. Here's one of my example Visual Force email templates. You can see the preview here. We have a header. We have some content specific to this template. We have this Likert scale thing happening in the middle. Then we have the footer down here in blue. As I edit this template, you'll see a very simple framework. I don't have to have all the boilerplate stuff in the Visual Force email. It's a couple things for structure. The first one here is this Visual Force component called email wrapper. That's handling a lot of the baseline structure of the email template. Um, you'll notice it has a parameter for brand. And I'll zoom in on this so you can see it a little easier. One of my clients, they operate various resorts and each one has their own brand. There's about 15 or 16 that we are managing. So I wanted a way to use the same structure but allow for brand to be a variable. If you're working in an org that just has one brand, we have also set up the way for you to just set up a single brand and make it default, so you don't have to necessarily worry about this. But the concept here will allow you to take this idea and go as far as you need it to go. The last thing here is color, which I'll show you in a second, sort of how that works. Once you have this email wrapper, what's happening inside is you set up a table. If you have gone down this rabbit hole of working with emails, you'll know that like Outlook is still based on 1997 technology. The only way to guarantee you're getting consistent layout and formatting and rendering is if you use tables to structure your content. So that's what we've done in this Visual Force email template. This is just HTML markup. There's nothing fancy you need to do to put a table tag, a row tag, anything you can do in HTML, you can put it right into Visual Force. So I think it opens up a lot of possibilities as far as customizing your content and making sure you're getting it to look exactly the way you want. You'll notice there's some comments here that sort of tell you like, here's where the body begins. Here's like a one column text situation. You can specify background colors, a little bit of boilerplate for another table inside of that. But then we're kind of quickly getting to the content here. And you can just put in how you want your email template to read. The one thing I'll point out is Visual Force has some of these built-in features like this rendered attribute. For any Visual Force tag, like this Apex output panel, it's just saying, hey, you're going to render some text, everything inside of these tags. When do you want that to show up? And here's where you can specify conditional visibility. What I like about this approach is everything inside of your tags can be just regular HTML markup, and I don't need to enclose it inside of quotation marks. If you were to try to do this in a HTML template, you'd have to use an if statement, and everything would need to be wrapped inside of the curly braces, which means you're going to have to put the content you want to show up inside of quotation marks, which is going to cause you a lot of hours of struggle to make sure that all of your tags use the other kind of quotation marks, and you can only have one because the whole thing is wrapped inside of quotation marks. So that has driven me crazy before, and that's one of the things I love about using a Visual Force email template is using some of these tags and components. It allows me to control when something shows up and then frees me up to put in HTML markup without some of those constraints. So that's already great right off the bat. You'll also notice some of my merge fields are traversing relationships. So I had mentioned that you can easily go up to 5 levels of relationships. This template's based on a custom object called response. And related to that response is a contact relationship field. If I want to go get the first name of that person, I can just use this dot notation to go grab that first name field. No custom workaround, no formula field on the object to clutter up the org. I can do all of that right here inside of my template. Same thing is true for other relationships. This one shows how I'm going through a couple different relationships, starting on response, going up to the booking, going up to the owner, getting their first name. Let me show you the brand stuff real quick. So you'll notice this says the brand is Arapaho. those brands are set up as custom metadata type records. So here's that Arapahoe email brand record. There are two fields here, one for header markup and one for footer markup. So all that's happening here is you specify what do you want to be in the header. This one is just a table, and inside of that there is a anchor tag which has an image inside of that. All that is doing is it's showing you the Arapahoe A logo image here at the top of the email. Because that's a custom metadata type, you can create this in a sandbox. You can start building out your email templates, and then you can push that to production. Somebody has an update for the phone number for Arapahoe, you go to that email brand custom metadata type, you edit it, and you can update the phone number there. If you want to do that in the sandbox and deploy it through, you have the option to do that. This is allowing me to centralize my header and footer information for a Visualforce email template. The only thing that we have to do is make sure we connect, and that's handled for us by this email wrapper component that is specifying the brand. So there is a little bit of Apex code behind the scenes on this that is applying some of the baseline formatting stuff, and then it goes and grabs whatever brand you specify here. Your situation is not that complicated. There is a default option here, so you can set up a single email brand, put your header and footer content, mark it as default, and that will be used by default across all of your Visualforce email templates where you are using this email wrapper. Any questions on that? One other nifty thing we incorporated there was a lot of times a brand will have a color that you want to reference for other pieces of your email template markup. You can specify the color here on the email brand record and then reference it later on. So the way we use that, again, you'll see this color variable is called color. Whatever you call it here in your email template, you can then reference later on, and it's just bringing through that hex value. The way I've used that here is for things like that Likert scale that has all the buttons and the background color of a lot of this stuff. I'm just referencing that color variable, and it's actually pulling it through from the email brand. That's just another nifty way to like keep your colors consistent so you don't have those hex codes spread across a bunch of different areas. If our brand color changes, I have one spot to make that update, and it'll apply it to all the places in the email template where we're referencing that. I'll show you the email wrapper real quick. Visualforce components, again, you can use these to centralize any information you want to sort of manage centrally. In here is all the boilerplate stuff to handle like finding the brand, the color, we pass through the subject, and a couple other things. This is all the boilerplate stuff to make sure our email is going to look good. Mostly Outlook workarounds, if I'm honest with you, are what's happening here, making sure it's going to look good on Outlook desktop, Outlook mobile, et cetera, et cetera. There's a little bit of styling applied to some of the base components, resetting stuff just so that we get some consistency. Another piece of this is the controller is a custom Apex class that comes with the package that I'll give you the links for. Mostly that's just handling go find the specified brand or use the default one if nothing was set. Last thing I want to touch on is all of that stuff is sort of baked into the package that I'm going to make available for you. You can also do some custom stuff. So I've set up a custom Visualforce component for a Likert scale. That way I can use that across a bunch of different situations for this client. That Likert scale is giving us that 0 through 11 layout with buttons, and each one has a link that it's linking to. The only thing that's really different about them is what number do you want to show and do you want to like append anything to the URL. But because I was going to be doing this across 15 different brands, I didn't want to have to specify that markup individually in case we needed to make an update. So I put that into its own visual force component and just pass through things like what color do you want the button to be? What is the base of the email that you want to apply to that anchor tag? So this same concept you can take and go even deeper with it. So let me post this in the chat. Here is the package with instructions. So the first thing you'll need to do is there's an installation link. This is an unmanaged package. It's going to go into your org under your namespace. There's a little bit of some introductory information here about sort of the decisions we've made to make sure stuff renders consistently across different email clients. Then you start to get some recipes for like every Visualforce email template you want to set up. Here is the boilerplate you need to put in so that we're referencing that email wrapper component. From there, some documentation on what that means. As you want to add specific markup to your email template, here's how you do a centered logo header. It's a table with a row, and then you put in the image, etc. This is an example of what that looks like. Here's a hero image and some basic markup. Here's content with a button and what that looks like. So you have a bunch of different basic building blocks. Again, here's even that Likert scale. If you wanted to go to that level, you can build something like that. But this walks you through all the basics of getting this framework set up in your org so that you can start to build out your email templates and have them follow some consistency. Use those visual force features that allow you to traverse upwards and I don't have an example here, but there's a repeater component in Visual Force that allow you to say like, what records do you want to loop over? So if you were on opportunity, you would say, hey, loop through all the opportunity products, the opportunity line items on this opportunity, and then apply this markup for each one. So it allows you to do that right inside of your Visual Force email template for any situation where you want to loop through all of the related records against a whatever the base object is. I know I've thrown a lot at you. That's essentially what I wanted to highlight here today. If you have any questions, feel free to come off mute or type them in the chat, and I will read Doty's right now. Did I have any hesitation linked to the older feature of Visual Force? Yeah, so I've had a couple people ask me, why didn't I do this with Lightning Web Components? I think the answer is we need to be compatible for Outlook's 1997 technology. And the way I understand a Lightning Web Component, it needs to be in an environment where it runs or it's not going to render because it's a little mini application. So I think it's going to be hard to use something like a Lightning Web Component and have it render in Outlook on a desktop or mobile, just because of that like environment issue. Whereas a lot of this quote unquote older technology, at the end of whenever it's rendering something, it's static HTML markup, kind of working to our benefit to make sure that it works across different email clients. So I think that's the answer there. Again, I didn't go too far down the rabbit hole of trying to make a Lightning Web Component work, but I imagine that would be the first roadblock we run into. If somebody wants to go down that rabbit hole, I'd love to figure out if that's possible and what are the gotchas with something like that. Have we considered just ignoring Microsoft people? I really wish I could. A lot of times my clients are an Outlook shop, so that is almost the one they prefer needs to look correct. So unfortunately, we cannot just ignore Microsoft people. Any other thoughts or questions?
I think it's really cool, Ev. Thank you.
Absolutely.